The Gathering Stone stood at the heart of Thorn Valley territory, a massive granite monolith worn smooth by centuries of pack ceremonies. Tonight, torches ringed the ancient rock, their flames casting dancing shadows across the faces of nearly 200 wolves gathered in human form. Sarah Whitlock stood at the edge of the crowd, her thin shawl pulled tight against the autumn chill. She didn't need to be at the center to know what was happening. The acrid scent of rejection magic hung heavy in the air, making her stomach turn. "Another one bites the dust," someone whispered behind her, followed by cruel laughter. Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the ground, counting the pebbles at her feet. 1, 2, 3. Anything to avoid looking at the stone, at the ritual unfolding there. But then Kellen Thornridge's voice rang out, clear and cold as winter ice. "I, Kellen Thornridge, future alpha of Thorn Valley Pack, reject you, Sarah Whitlock, as my mate. May the moon goddess sever our bond and release me from this burden." The words struck her like physical blows. Sarah's knees buckled and she caught herself against a nearby tree, bark biting into her palms. Around her, pack members whispered and pointed, but none moved to help. "An Omega," she heard someone mutter. "Imagine an alpha being cursed with an Omega mate. The goddess must have been testing him." Sarah forced herself to stand straight, to meet Kellen's dark eyes across the crowd. He stood on the Gathering Stone in formal ceremonial robes, his beta and closest friends flanking him. His handsome face showed nothing, no regret, no guilt, not even anger, just cold indifference. "Do you accept this rejection?" Elder Mordain asked, his ancient voice carrying across the silent gathering. Sarah opened her mouth, but her wolf whimpered inside her, bleeding from wounds that would never fully heal. The partial bond between them, formed the moment they'd turned 18 3 days ago, was already beginning to fray like rotted rope. Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I accept." The words tasted like ash. The moment they left her lips, something inside her chest tore. The fragile golden thread connecting her to Kellen snapped with an almost audible crack, and Sarah gasped as pain flooded through her. The crowd erupted in approving murmurs. Kellen stepped down from the stone without a backward glance, already moving toward Vivian Ashcroft, the beta's daughter who'd been warming his bed for months. The beautiful she-wolf draped herself over his arm, shooting Sarah a triumphant smile. "Pathetic," Vivian's voice carried clearly. "Imagine thinking an Omega could ever be worthy of an Alpha." Laughter followed Sarah as she stumbled away from the gathering, her vision blurred with unshed tears. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She'd save that for later, alone in the tiny cabin at the edge of packlands that she shared with her ailing grandmother. The forest welcomed her with familiar shadows and the scent of pine. Sarah walked without direction, letting her feet carry her deeper into the woods, away from the torches and the celebration that would inevitably follow. Kellen was free now, free to choose a proper mate, and the pack would drink and dance in honor of his good fortune. She didn't know how long she walked before she heard it, a soft, pained whimper cutting through the night sounds. Sarah froze, her Omega instincts immediately alert. That sound. It was young, wounded, desperate. She followed the sound to a small clearing where moonlight pooled like liquid silver. There, half hidden beneath a fallen log, lay a wolf pup. But not just any pup. Even from several feet away, Sarah could see this was no ordinary wolf. Its fur shimmered with an ethereal quality, silver-white streaked with threads of gold. Blood matted its coat, and one of its small legs bent at an unnatural angle. "Oh, goddess," Sarah breathed, dropping to her knees beside the creature. The pup's eyes fluttered open, brilliant amber that seemed to glow with inner light. It whimpered again, trying to crawl toward her despite its injuries. Sarah's heart clenched. She reached out carefully, letting the pup scent her hand before touching it. Shh, little one. I've got you. Behind her, branches snapped. Sarah turned to find 3 pack members emerging from the tree line: Garrett, Marcus, and Cole, all from Kellen's inner circle. Well, well, Garrett drawled, his lips curling. The rejected Omega crying in the woods. How pathetic. There's a pup here, Sarah said urgently, turning back to the injured creature. It needs help. It needs a healer. That's not pack, Marcus interrupted, moving closer to peer at the pup. His eyes widened slightly. Look at its markings. That's not from Thorn Valley. So? Sarah carefully scooped the pup into her arms, cradling it against her chest. It's hurt. It's a child. Cole laughed, the sound ugly in the peaceful night. It's a rogue pup, probably diseased. Best to leave it for the scavengers. Or put it out of its misery, Garrett added, reaching for the knife at his belt. Sarah's wolf snarled inside her, and she backed away, clutching the pup tighter. No, I won't let you. Won't let us? Marcus stepped forward, his dominance as a high-ranking wolf pressing against her Omega senses. You don't give orders, Whitlock. You're nothing, an Omega without a mate, without a place. The kindest thing Kellen ever did was reject you. The pup whimpered against her chest, its small body trembling. Sarah felt something warm spreading across her shirt. More blood. It was dying. Get out of my way, she said quietly. Garrett laughed. Or what? You'll fight us? You can barely stand after a rejection, and you want to... Sarah didn't wait for him to finish. She turned and ran. Behind her, she heard their shouts, heard them crashing through the underbrush in pursuit. But Sarah knew these woods. She'd spent her whole life exploring every trail, every hidden path that the dominant wolves were too proud to bother learning. She ducked under low branches, leaped over roots, her Omega speed surprising even herself. The pup's heart beat against hers, weak but steady. Hold on, she whispered. Just hold on. The sounds of pursuit faded. Sarah didn't stop running until she reached the stream that marked the eastern boundary of Thorn Valley lands. She splashed across it, technically leaving pack territory, but she didn't care. The small cave on the other side had been her secret place since childhood. Sarah ducked inside, finally allowing herself to collapse against the cool stone wall. Her whole body shook, from exertion, from the rejection pain still echoing in her chest, from fear of what she'd just done. She looked down at the pup in her arms. Its breathing had grown shallow, its eyes closed. Blood seeped from wounds she could now see more clearly. Claw marks, deep and vicious. Someone had attacked this baby deliberately. Who are you? Sarah whispered, gently stroking the pup's soft fur. Where did you come from? The pup's eyes opened one more time, fixing on her face with startling intelligence. Then its small chest rose and fell once more before going terribly, horribly still. No, Sarah gasped. No, 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 stay with me, please. She pressed her ear to the pup's chest, desperate for a heartbeat. Nothing. Sarah's tears finally fell, hot and bitter. First her mate. Now this innocent life. The unfairness of it all crashed over her like a wave. But then, something strange happened. A warmth began to bloom in Sarah's chest, spreading down her arms and into her hands where they cradled the pup. It felt like sunlight, like springtime, like hope itself flowing through her veins. Her hands began to glow with a soft golden light. Sarah gasped, staring at her own skin as if it belonged to a stranger. This wasn't normal. This wasn't possible. Omegas didn't have special powers. They were the weakest wolves, good only for bearing children and submitting to their betters. But the light grew brighter, and beneath her hands, the pup's wounds began to close. What Sarah didn't know What she couldn't see from her position deep in the cave was the massive figure standing in the shadows at the cave's entrance. Alpha King Kalen Ironwood had been tracking his stolen son for 3 days across hostile territory. He'd picked up the pup's scent at the border, followed it into Thorn Valley lands despite the risk, and he'd been mere moments behind when he heard the Omega's pursuers, when he'd watched her protect his child with a ferocity that should have been impossible for her rank. Now he stood frozen, his winter blue eyes fixed on the glowing Omega cradling his son. She was using magic, healing magic, and his son, who'd been dead mere seconds ago, took a shuddering breath. Kalen's wolf stirred inside him with sudden, fierce interest. "Mine," it whispered. "Ours." Sarah's hands stopped glowing as suddenly as they'd started, the golden light fading like the last rays of sunset. She stared at her palms, her mind refusing to process what had just happened. Magic. She'd used magic. That was impossible. Omegas didn't have magic. Nobody in Thorn Valley had magic. Such gifts were rare, appearing maybe once in a generation, and only in the strongest bloodlines. The pup stirred in her arms, letting out a tiny yawn that showed needle-sharp baby teeth. Its amber eyes opened, clear and bright, no longer clouded with pain. The wounds that had been bleeding freely just moments ago were now pink scar tissue, already healing. "You're alive," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. "You're actually alive." The pup licked her hand with a surprisingly rough tongue, then nuzzled against her chest as if seeking warmth. Sarah wrapped her shawl around the small creature, her mind racing. What had she done? Where had that power come from? And more importantly, what would happen if anyone found out? Her grandmother's warnings echoed in her memory. "Our family has always been different, child. Your mother had the gift too. That's why they killed her." Sarah had always thought those were just the rambling fears of an old woman losing her grip on reality. But now, a branch snapped outside the cave. Sarah's head jerked up, her enhanced Omega hearing picking up the sound of multiple footsteps approaching. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "She came this way. I saw her cross the stream." Garrett's voice drifted through the night air. "Kellen's not going to like that she left Packlands," Marcus replied. "Even a rejected Omega can't just run off whenever she wants." Sarah looked down at the pup, now sleeping peacefully in her arms. She couldn't let them find her with this child, couldn't let them see what she'd done. Moving as quietly as possible, she crept to the back of the cave where a narrow passage led to another exit, one she'd discovered as a child and never told anyone about. It was barely wide enough for her to squeeze through, and she had to cradle the pup carefully to avoid bumping its healing wounds against the stone. The passage seemed to stretch on forever, her breath echoing off the close walls. Finally, she emerged on the far side of the hill, a good quarter-mile from where Garrett and the others would be searching. Sarah paused to catch her breath, scanning the dark forest. She was well outside Thorn Valley territory now, technically in neutral lands. But neutral didn't mean safe. Rogue wolves and other predators roamed these areas, and she had no pack to protect her anymore. The pup whimpered, and Sarah realized with a jolt that she could feel its emotions: fear, confusion, hunger. The sensation was faint but unmistakable, like a whisper in the back of her mind. "Another impossibility," she muttered. "What's one more?" She started walking, heading north toward the only place she could think of that might offer safety: the old healer's cottage where her grandmother had been born. It had stood empty for years, abandoned after her great-grandmother's death. But it was shelter. And more importantly, it was far from Thorn Valley. The forest grew denser as she walked, moonlight struggling to penetrate the thick canopy above. Sarah's Omega night vision helped, but she still stumbled over roots and branches. The pup grew heavier in her arms with each step, though it couldn't weigh more than 10 pounds. An hour passed, then 2. Sarah's feet ached, her arms burned, and the rejection pain in her chest had settled into a constant, throbbing ache. But she pushed on, driven by an instinct she didn't fully understand. She had to protect this pup, had to keep it safe. As dawn began to break, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Sarah finally spotted the cottage. It looked exactly as she remembered from her one childhood visit. Small and slightly crooked, with ivy climbing the stone walls and a garden long since overgrown with wildflowers. Home, she breathed, though she'd never lived here. We made it. She approached the door carefully, testing the old wood. It swung open with a protesting creak, revealing a single room with a fireplace, a small bed, and shelves lined with dusty jars and bottles. Sarah laid the pup gently on the bed, which at least had been covered with a protective sheet. The little creature immediately curled into a ball, its sides rising and falling with deep, steady breaths. "Sleep, little one," Sarah murmured, brushing her fingers over its silky fur. "You're safe now." She turned to assess her new sanctuary. The cottage was surprisingly intact. The roof looked solid, and the windows, though dirty, were unbroken. Her great-grandmother had been the pack's healer before. Well, before she'd been accused of witchcraft and driven out. The family resemblance is uncanny, Sarah thought bitterly. She was examining the jars on the shelves. Most contained dried herbs, still somehow preserved, when a sound outside froze her blood. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, circling the cottage. Sarah's wolf stirred nervously. That wasn't Garrett or his friends. This was something else. Something much more dangerous. A shadow fell across the doorway, and Sarah spun around to find herself face to face with the largest man she'd ever seen. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders that nearly filled the doorframe. His hair was black as midnight, pulled back from a face that could have been carved from granite. But it was his eyes that captured her attention, winter blue and blazing with an intensity that made her Omega instincts scream at her to submit. This was an alpha. Not just any alpha. The power radiating from him was unlike anything she'd encountered before. "You," he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through her bones. His gaze moved past her to the pup sleeping on the bed. "You saved him." Sarah's mind raced. Him? So this stranger knew the pup? "Who are you?" she managed to ask, though her voice came out barely above a whisper. The man's eyes returned to her face, and something flickered in their glacial depths. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "I am Kalen Ironwood," he said, "Alpha King of the Northern Territories." His gaze intensified. "And that pup you're protecting is my son." The world tilted beneath Sarah's feet. Alpha King. She'd saved the Alpha King's son. "He was dying," she heard herself say. "I couldn't just leave him." "No," Kalen agreed, taking a step into the cottage. Sarah fought the urge to back away, to bare her throat in submission. "You couldn't. Even though your own pack abandoned him. Even though helping him put you at risk." He moved closer, his frost-colored stare never leaving her face. "Why?" "Because it was right," Sarah said simply. Something changed in Kalen's expression. His features softened almost imperceptibly. He opened his mouth to respond, when suddenly the pup let out a sharp cry of pain. Sarah spun around to find the small creature convulsing on the bed, its body seizing. The wounds she'd healed were opening again, blood beginning to seep through silver-white fur. "No!" She rushed to the pup's side. "What's happening?" "Poison!" Kalen growled, immediately at her side. "The same poison that's been killing him since he was taken. Your healing slowed it, but it's still in his system." The pup's breathing grew labored, each breath a rattling wheeze. Its amber eyes opened, fixing on Sarah's face with desperate recognition before rolling back. "He's dying," Kalen said, and for the first time, Sarah heard raw emotion in his voice. The poison is too strong. Without a healer with moon magic, he won't survive the hour. Sarah looked down at the pup, at the innocent life fading before her eyes, then at her hands, which had glowed with golden light just hours before. She didn't understand her power, didn't know where it came from or how to control it, but she knew she couldn't watch this child die. "Move," she said to Kaylin, surprised by the authority in her own voice. The Alpha King's eyes widened in shock, and Omega ordering him. But after a heartbeat, he stepped aside. Sarah placed her hands on the pup's chest, closed her eyes, and reached for that warmth inside her. For the light that had saved him once before. "Please," she prayed to the moon goddess, "please let me save him." Her hands began to glow. Behind her, she heard Kaylin's sharp intake of breath, felt his intense gaze burning into her back. But Sarah focused on the pup, on the poison she could now sense spreading through its small body like black veins. She imagined her light chasing that darkness, burning it away, healing what had been broken. The pup's convulsions slowed, its breathing eased. And as Sarah poured everything she had into the healing, she felt something else. A connection forming, delicate as spider silk, between her heart and the pup's. Between her and the child she'd saved twice now. When she finally pulled her hands away, exhausted beyond measure, the pup was sleeping peacefully. Its wounds had closed completely, and the faint black veins of poison had vanished. Sarah swayed, her vision darkening at the edges. Strong arms caught her before she hit the floor. "Easy." Kaylin's voice rumbled against her ear as he lifted her effortlessly. "I've got you." Sarah wanted to protest, to push away from the Alpha King whose dominance should have terrified her. But her body had other ideas. The moment he touched her, something inside her settled. A rightness she'd never felt before, not even with Kellen. Her wolf purred, content for the first time since the rejection. "Mate," it whispered. "No," Sarah thought desperately as consciousness slipped away. "Not again. Please, not again." But as darkness claimed her, the last thing she felt was Kaylin's arms tightening around her, and his voice, rough with wonder. "What are you?" Sarah woke to the sound of a crackling fire and the scent of pine smoke. For a moment she thought she was back in her grandmother's cabin, safe and warm. Then memory came flooding back. The rejection, the pup, the Alpha King. Her eyes flew open. She was lying on the cottage's small bed covered with a thick fur blanket she didn't recognize. The pup, Kaylin's son, was curled against her side, its small body radiating warmth. And standing by the fireplace, his back to her, was the Alpha King himself. Sarah tried to sit up quietly, but the pup immediately stirred, letting out a sleepy yip. Kaylin turned, his winter blue eyes finding hers instantly. "You're awake," he said. Not a question. "How long was I unconscious?" Sarah asked, her voice hoarse. 3 hours? Kaylin moved closer, and Sarah had to resist the urge to shrink back. Everything about this man radiated power and danger. "You depleted yourself healing my son." "That was foolish." "He was dying," Sarah said flatly, "and you could have died saving him." Kaylin's jaw tightened. "Do you have any idea how rare healing magic is? How valuable?" Sarah pulled the blanket tighter around herself, acutely aware that she was alone in an isolated cottage with a strange alpha. "I didn't ask for this power. I didn't even know I had it until tonight." That made Kaylin pause. "You've never used it before?" "Never." Sarah looked down at her hands, which appeared completely normal now. "I didn't think Omegas could have magic." "They can't," Kaylin said quietly. "Which means you're not just an Omega." Before Sarah could respond, the pup stretched and yawned, its amber eyes blinking open. When it saw Kaylin, it let out an excited yip and tried to scramble off the bed, but its legs were still wobbly from the poison's effects. Kalen caught his son before he could tumble to the floor, lifting him with surprising gentleness. The pup licked his father's face enthusiastically, tail wagging. "Easy, Asher," Kalen murmured, and Sarah realized that this was the first time she'd heard the pup's name. "You need to rest." But Asher was having none of it. He squirmed in his father's arms, reaching toward Sarah with small paws. "He wants you," Kalen said, his tone unreadable. Sarah hesitated, then held out her arms. Kalen placed Asher gently in her lap, and the pup immediately curled against her, letting out a contented sigh. The connection Sarah had felt earlier flared to life, stronger now. She could sense Asher's emotions: happiness, safety, love. The intensity of it made her breath catch. "What did you do?" Kalen asked, his voice sharp. "When you healed him the second time, something changed. I could feel it." Sarah shook her head. "I don't know. I couldn't let him die." Kalen studied her with unsettling intensity. "You bonded with him. Created a soul link? Do you understand what that means?" "No," Sarah admitted, fear creeping up her spine. "It means my son has claimed you as pack, as family." Kalen's eyes blazed. "Such bonds are permanent, Omega. They can't be broken." Sarah looked down at Asher, who gazed up at her with absolute trust. "I didn't mean to—" "Intentions don't matter." Kalen began pacing, his movements agitated. "Asher is my heir, the future Alpha King. Everyone who bonds with him becomes part of the royal family by law. Do you understand? You just tied yourself to the Northern Territory's crown." The implications crashed over Sarah like a wave. "I can't. I'm nobody. A rejected Omega from a minor pack. You're a healer with moon magic who saved my son's life twice and created a soul bond with him." Kalen stopped pacing, fixing her with that intense gaze. "You're far more than nobody." Sarah's wolf stirred at his words, preening under the Alpha King's attention. She shoved the feeling down ruthlessly. She'd already had one mate reject her tonight. She wouldn't be foolish enough to hope for another. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Kalen was silent for a long moment. "Now, you tell me who tried to kill my son, and who poisoned him." The shift in his tone made Sarah shiver. This was the Alpha King speaking now, not the concerned father. "I don't know who attacked him," she said honestly. "I found him in the woods during my packs." She swallowed hard. "During a ceremony. He was already injured." "But you know something," Kalen pressed. "I can see it in your eyes." Sarah thought about Garrett, Marcus, and Cole. About the way they'd wanted to kill Asher just for being a rogue pup. About the cruelty that seemed to permeate Thorn Valley Pack lately. "My former pack," she said carefully, "has been changing. The future Alpha, Kellen, he's been meeting with outsiders. Wolves I don't recognize. And there have been disappearances. Young wolves who questioned his authority." Kalen's expression darkened. "Kellen Thornridge? You know him?" "I know of him. His father reached out months ago, proposing an alliance." Kalen's lip curled in disgust. "I refused. The Thornridges have a reputation for ruthlessness that borders on cruelty." "That's putting it mildly," Sarah muttered. "Is he the one who rejected you?" The question caught Sarah off guard. "How did you—" "I can smell it on you." The broken bond. Kalen moved closer and Sarah's pulse quickened. "Fresh. Within the last few hours." Sarah looked away, shame burning through her. "He found his true mate." She lied. It was easier than admitting Kellen had rejected her simply for being an Omega. "No, he didn't." Kalen's voice was soft but certain. "A true mate bond smells different. This was a choice, not fate." Tears pricked Sarah's eyes and she blinked them back furiously. She would not cry. Not in front of this powerful alpha who'd already seen too much of her weakness. But then Asher nuzzled against her, sending waves of comfort through their bond, and the tears fell anyway. "He said I was a burden," Sarah whispered, "that an Omega could never be worthy of an Alpha." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. When Sarah looked up, Kaylin's eyes had shifted to a glacial blue that practically glowed with rage. "That fool," he growled, "rejected a moon-blessed healer because of her rank?" "I didn't know about the healing then." "Neither did he." "It doesn't matter." Kaylin's voice was hard as stone. "You saved a dying child tonight, my child, without thought for yourself. You used magic you didn't understand, risked your own pack's wrath, crossed into neutral territory alone. Those are not the actions of someone weak or unworthy." The fierce conviction in his words made something warm bloom in Sarah's chest, but she crushed it ruthlessly. She'd learned her lesson about hoping for acceptance from powerful alphas. "Thank you," she said formally, "but it doesn't change what I am." "No," Kaylin agreed. "It doesn't. You're still an Omega." He paused. "An Omega who's now soul-bonded to the heir of the Northern Territories. An Omega who possesses rare healing magic. An Omega who just became one of the most important wolves in this realm, whether you like it or not." Sarah's head spun. "I don't understand." "You will." Kaylin glanced toward the window where dawnlight was growing stronger. "But first, we need to deal with the immediate problem. Your former pack will be looking for you. And when they discover you're with me, they'll think I kidnapped Asher," Sarah realized. "Or worse, that you're a spy for the Northern Territories." Kaylin's expression grew grim. "Either way, they'll come for you. And they won't be gentle." Fear shot through Sarah, but before she could respond, Asher let out a sharp whine. His small body began to tremble, and Sarah felt a spike of pain through their bond. "The poison," she gasped. "It's not gone. I can feel it." Kaylin was at her side instantly. "That's impossible. You burned it all away." But even as he spoke, black veins began appearing beneath Asher's silver fur, spreading from his heart outward. "No, no, no." Sarah pressed her hands to the pup's chest, calling on her magic. The golden light came easily this time, but when it touched the black veins, they seemed to absorb it like water into sand. "It's fighting back," she said desperately. "The poison is alive somehow. It's adapting." Kaylin cursed viciously. "Shadow magic. Someone didn't just poison my son. They cursed him." Asher's breathing grew labored. Through their bond, Sarah felt his pain, his fear. The pup looked up at her with those trusting amber eyes, and something inside her snapped. "No," she said fiercely. "I won't let you die." "I won't." She closed her eyes and reached deeper, past the golden healing light to something else, something ancient and powerful that had been sleeping in her blood for generations. The light that burst from her hands this time was blinding, pure white instead of gold. It didn't just push against the shadow magic. It consumed it, burning through the black veins like fire through paper. Sarah felt herself falling, felt her consciousness slipping away as she poured everything she had into saving Asher. Distantly, she heard Kaylin calling her name, felt strong arms catching her again. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The shadow magic fought back, tried to latch onto her instead. Sarah felt it crawling up her arms like ice, felt it trying to corrupt her own magic. Then suddenly, warmth flooded through her, different from her own power. It felt wild and primal, like moonlight given form. It wrapped around her, protecting her, and together with her white light, they destroyed the last of the shadow curse. Asher took a deep, shuddering breath. The black veins vanished completely. and Sarah collapsed into darkness, but not before she felt Kalen's lips brush her forehead and heard his whispered words. You stubborn, brave, impossible Omega, what am I going to do with you? Sarah woke to voices speaking in low, urgent tones. Her whole body ached as though she'd been trampled by a herd of deer, and her magic felt like a dried-up well, completely depleted. Can't stay here. Thorn Valley scouts will find this place by nightfall, a male voice was saying. Not Kalen. Someone younger. I'm aware of that, Finian, Kalen replied, his tone clipped. But she can't be moved yet. She nearly killed herself saving Asher. All the more reason to get her to safety. If Thornridge gets his hands on a healer with moon magic, he won't. The finality in Kalen's voice made it clear that wasn't a suggestion. Sarah forced her eyes open. The cottage was brighter now, afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. Asher was curled up beside her on the bed, his small chest rising and falling with healthy breaths. And standing near the fireplace were Kalen and another man. The stranger was younger than Kalen, perhaps mid-20s, with auburn hair and sharp green eyes. He wore leather armor marked with the Northern Territory's crest, a silver wolf beneath a full moon. She's awake, Finian said, noticing her movement. Both men turned to her immediately. Kalen crossed the room in 3 long strides, his expression intense as he studied her face. How do you feel? He asked. Like I fought a bear and lost, Sarah admitted. She tried to sit up, and the world spun. Kalen's hand steadied her, his touch sending unexpected warmth through her arm. You pushed too hard, he said, and she heard genuine concern beneath the sternness. Your magic needs time to replenish. Asher? Sarah looked down at the pup. Completely healed. The curse is gone. Kalen's expression softened fractionally. Thanks to you. Finian cleared his throat. My lord, we really should discuss. Finian, this is Sarah Whitlock. Kalen interrupted. Sarah, this is Finian Stormwind, my beta and closest advisor. Sarah nodded politely, acutely aware of how she must look, rumpled, exhausted, and very obviously Omega. Finian's expression was carefully neutral, but she could sense his curiosity. Miss Whitlock, Finian said formally, on behalf of the Northern Territories, I thank you for saving our prince. I didn't know he was a prince, Sarah said honestly. I just knew he needed help. Something flickered in Finian's eyes. Respect, perhaps. That makes your actions even more admirable. Finian tracked me here with 3 of my personal guard, Kalen explained. They're currently scouting the perimeter. We intercepted a Thorn Valley patrol heading this direction about an hour ago. Fear spiked through Sarah. Did they see you? We encouraged them to search elsewhere, Finian said with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sarah didn't want to know what that meant. The point is, Kalen continued, Thorn Valley knows you left Packlands with something valuable. They're searching for you. They think I stole something? Sarah asked, confused. They think you stole information, or made contact with enemy packs. Kalen's jaw tightened. Your former alpha is spreading rumors that you were a spy all along. The betrayal shouldn't have hurt. Kellen had already rejected her in the cruelest way possible. But somehow, being accused of treason on top of everything else made her chest ache. That's ridiculous, she said weakly. Of course it is, Kalen agreed, but it gives them justification to hunt you down, and anyone found harboring a pack traitor would be considered an enemy. The implications settled over Sarah like a heavy cloak. So if they find me with you, it would give Thorn Valley an excuse to declare war on the Northern Territories, Finian finished grimly, claiming we corrupted one of their wolves and turned her into a spy. But I'm not part of Thorn Valley anymore, Sarah protested. Kellen rejected me. The bond is broken. Rejection doesn't automatically sever pack ties, Kalen said, especially not for Omegas. Legally, you're still considered Thorn Valley property until another pack formally claims you. The word property made Sarah's wolf snarl. She was so tired of being treated like an object to be owned. Then I'll go somewhere else, she said, trying to stand. Her legs immediately gave out, and Kaelin caught her before she could fall. I'll leave the territories entirely. Go rogue. Absolutely not, Kaelin said, his arms still around her. A lone Omega wouldn't survive 3 days in rogue lands, especially not one with your scent. Sarah looked up at him, confused. My scent? Kaelin's expression grew uncomfortable. He released her, taking a careful step back. Your Omega pheromones are unusually strong. It's part of what makes you such a powerful healer. Your body naturally produces calming, healing hormones, but it also makes you a target for rogue alphas. Heat flooded Sarah's cheeks. She'd always known her scent was different, that it seemed to affect wolves more strongly than normal Omegas. It was part of why Thorn Valley had kept her so isolated. So what do I do? She asked quietly. I can't stay here, I can't go to Thorn Valley, and I can't go rogue. Kaelin and Finian exchanged a long look. Some silent conversation passed between them before Finian sighed and nodded. There is one option, Kaelin said slowly, though you may not like it. At this point, I'll consider anything that doesn't end with me dead or imprisoned, Sarah said. You could accept sanctuary in the Northern Territories. Kaelin watched her reaction carefully. As Asher's bonded healer, you'd have legitimate claim to pack protection. It sounded too good to be true. Just like that? You'd take in a strange Omega from another pack? You're not strange, Kaelin said, something indefinable in his tone. And you're not just any Omega. You saved my son's life. Twice. That debt isn't easily repaid. I don't want payment, Sarah said quickly. I just want safety. For myself and... She hesitated, then pushed forward. And for my grandmother. She's elderly, still in Thorn Valley. If Kellen thinks I'm a traitor, he might hurt her to punish me. Kaelin's expression hardened. Where is she? A small cabin on the western edge of Packlands. She can't walk far. Her joints are too weak. Finian, Kaelin said without taking his eyes off Sarah. Take Marcus and Joelle. Bring the grandmother here. Use force if necessary, but don't harm any Thorn Valley wolves unless they attack first. My lord, Finian began. Do it, Kaelin commanded. Now. Finian bowed his head in submission and left the cottage quickly. Sarah heard him calling orders to the guards outside. Thank you, Sarah whispered, tears threatening again. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. Kaelin moved closer, his winter blue eyes intense. You saved what matters most to me. The least I can do is protect what matters to you. Asher chose that moment to wake up, yawning and stretching. The pup's eyes brightened when he saw his father, and he shifted forms, a process that looked like watching water flow upward. Where the wolf pup had been, now sat a small boy with silver-white hair and amber eyes. He looked about 4 years old, wearing nothing but the oversized shirt someone had apparently dressed him in. Papa! Asher launched himself at Kaelin, who caught him easily. Easy, little wolf, Kaelin said, but his voice was warm with affection. You need to rest. But I feel good, Asher insisted. Then his gaze found Sarah, and his whole face lit up. Sarah, you're awake. Before Sarah could respond, Asher squirmed out of his father's arms and climbed onto the bed, wrapping his small arms around her neck. Thank you for making the hurt go away, he whispered against her shoulder. Papa said you saved me. Sarah's heart melted. She hugged the child back, feeling the soul bond between them pulse with warmth. You're welcome, sweetheart. Are you going to stay with us? Asher pulled back, his amber eyes hopeful. Please say yes. I like you. Asher, Kaylin said warningly. That's not your decision to make. But Papa, she's packed now. I can feel it. Asher put his small hand over his heart. Right here. She's ours. Kaylin's expression grew complicated. It's not that simple, son. Why not? Asher looked genuinely confused. You always said Pack takes care of Pack. Sarah took care of me, so now we take care of her. Right? Out of the mouths of pups, Sarah thought, seeing Kaylin struggle with his son's innocent logic. Your father is right, Asher, Sarah said gently. It's complicated. I'm from a different pack, and there are rules about these things. Rules are stupid, Asher declared with all the confidence of a 4-year-old. Despite everything, Sarah found herself smiling. Sometimes they are. Kaylin rubbed his temples, looking more like a tired father than an alpha king in that moment. Asher, why don't you go ask Joelle if she brought any of those honey cakes you like? Really? Asher's eyes widened. But you said too many sweets would... One cake won't hurt, Kaylin said. Go on. Asher scrambled off the bed and ran out of the cottage, his childish excitement making the situation feel almost normal for a moment. Once they were alone, Kaylin turned to Sarah with an unreadable expression. He's right, you know, Kaylin said quietly, about you being Pack. The soul bond makes it official in ways that supersede normal Pack law. Asher claimed you, which means the Northern Territories has a legitimate right, even an obligation, to protect you. But? Sarah prompted, hearing the hesitation in his voice. But bringing you into the pack will cause complications, Kaylin admitted. You're a rejected Omega from another territory with moon magic that makes you incredibly valuable. Every unmated alpha in my pack will want to court you, and some of the traditionalists will question whether an Omega should hold such an important position as the prince's personal healer. I don't want to cause problems for you, Sarah said. You're not causing problems. Kellen Thornridge is causing problems. Kaylin's eyes flashed with anger. That fool rejected a moon-blessed healer and then tried to kill my son. Once we figure out the connection between those two events, I'm going to enjoy making him pay. You think Kellen was involved in Asher's kidnapping? Sarah asked, her blood running cold. I think it's quite a coincidence that my son disappeared during a trade meeting near Thorn Valley borders, and then turned up poisoned with shadow magic in Thorn Valley territory. Kaylin's voice was hard. Shadow magic requires a warlock to cast, and warlocks don't work cheap. Sarah thought about the strange wolves Kellen had been meeting with, about the disappearances and the increasing cruelty in the pack. He's planning something? Yes, Kaylin agreed, and now that he knows you saved Asher, you're a target. Which is why... He took a deep breath, and Sarah sensed this was important. I'm formally offering you sanctuary and a place in the Northern Territories pack. Not as payment for saving Asher, but because you deserve safety and protection. What would I have to do? Sarah asked carefully. Serve as Asher's healer and protector. Train your magic with our pack's elders, and... He hesitated. Accept my mark as your alpha. Sarah's wolf perked up at that, far too interested. Your mark? A claiming bite. On your shoulder, not your neck, Kaylin clarified quickly. It would identify you as under my personal protection. No one in the Northern Territories would dare harm you, and other packs would know you're not available for aggressive courtship. It would look like we're mates, Sarah realized. No, Kaylin corrected. It would look like you're under my protection. There's a difference. Mates mark each other's necks, in the mating spot. This would just be a claim of guardianship. Sarah studied his face, trying to read his expression. Why would you do this? Risk the political complications? Because you saved my son, Kaylin said simply, and because... He seemed to struggle with the next words. Because my wolf won't let me leave you unprotected. You're important to Asher, which makes you important to me. It wasn't a declaration of love or desire, but it was honest, and somehow that meant more than pretty words. Okay, Sarah said quietly. I accept. Kalen's eyes widened slightly, as if he hadn't expected her to agree so easily. You understand what this means? You'd be leaving everything behind. Your old pack. Your old life. I don't have an old life anymore, Sarah said. Kellen made sure of that when he rejected me. And honestly, she looked toward the door where Asher had disappeared. That little boy showed me more kindness in 5 minutes than my pack did in 23 years. If that's what the Northern Territories is like, then yes, I want in. Something fierce and satisfied crossed Kalen's face. He moved closer, close enough that Sarah could feel the heat radiating from his body. This will hurt, he warned, and once it's done, we'll be connected. Not like mates, but you'll be able to sense me, and I'll be able to sense you. Is that acceptable? Sarah's pulse raced, but she nodded. Yes. Then bare your shoulder. With trembling fingers, Sarah pulled aside the collar of her shirt, exposing the curve of her shoulder. Kalen's eyes tracked the movement and she saw his pupils dilate. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind. His breath was warm against her skin, and Sarah's wolf practically purred at his nearness. This makes you mine to protect, Kalen murmured against her shoulder. Mine to guard, mine to keep safe. Do you accept this claim, Sarah Whitlock? I accept, Sarah whispered. His teeth sank into her shoulder. The claiming bite hurt less than Sarah expected. A sharp sting that quickly transformed into a warm, spreading sensation. She felt Kalen's magic seeping into her, marking her as his to protect, and something inside her settled with a rightness that should have terrified her. When Kalen pulled back, his eyes were glowing winter blue, his wolf clearly close to the surface. Blood stained his lips, and he looked at her with an intensity that made her shiver. It's done, he said, his voice rougher than before. Your Northern Territories now. Mine to protect. Sarah touched her shoulder, feeling the bite marks already beginning to heal. But she could sense something else. A thread connecting her to Kalen, faint but unmistakable. Through it, she could feel his emotions, protectiveness, satisfaction, and something else she couldn't quite identify. I can feel you, she said, wonder in her voice. And I can feel you, Kalen replied. Your fear, your pain, your exhaustion. His expression softened. You need rest, Sarah. Real rest, not just unconsciousness between magical healings. Before Sarah could respond, the door burst open. Finian stood there, his expression urgent. My lord, we have a problem. Thorn Valley warriors are surrounding the cottage, at least 20 of them, led by Kellen Thornridge himself. Sarah's blood turned to ice. How did they find us so fast? They must have been tracking you since last night, Finian said grimly. And now they're demanding we hand over their stolen property. Kalen's eyes flashed dangerously. Sarah isn't property, and she's under my protection now. They're not going to care about that, Finian warned. Thornridge is calling this an act of war, claiming you kidnapped one of his wolves. I kidnapped her? Kalen's laugh was cold. That's rich, considering he rejected and abandoned her. Outside, Sarah could hear voices shouting. One voice carried above the rest, Kellen's, commanding and cruel. Send out the traitor, Ironwood, or we'll take her by force. Asher appeared in the doorway, his small face frightened. Papa? What's happening? Kalen scooped up his son immediately. It's all right, little wolf. Papa's going to handle this. But Sarah could see the calculation in Kalen's eyes. He was outnumbered in hostile territory, with an injured Omega and his young son to protect. Even an Alpha King couldn't fight impossible odds. "Let me go," Sarah said quietly. "If I surrender, they'll leave you alone." "Absolutely not," Kaelin said immediately. "You're Pack now. I don't abandon Pack." "But you'll die defending me," Sarah argued. "You and your guards? And then, what happens to Asher?" The thread between them pulsed with Kaelin's conflict. He knew she was right, but his wolf refused to let her go. "There has to be another way," Finian muttered, pacing. "If we could get word to the main territory, reinforcements could be here in hours." "We don't have hours," Kaelin interrupted. "Thornridge isn't patient." As if to prove his point, something crashed against the cottage door. The sound of splintering wood made them all jump. "Last chance, Ironwood," Kellen shouted. "Give us the Omega or we're coming in." Sarah stood, her decision made. But before she could take a step toward the door, Kaelin grabbed her arm. "Don't," he said, his voice raw. "Please. I can't." He stopped, struggling with words. "I just found you. Don't ask me to let you go." The admission hung between them, heavy with meaning. Sarah felt her own heart twist in response. "I'm not asking," she said softly. "I'm telling you to protect your son. That's what matters." Before Kaelin could respond, the door exploded inward. Thorn Valley warriors poured into the cottage, led by Kellen himself. Sarah's former mate looked exactly as she remembered. Tall, dark-haired, classically handsome with eyes like polished amber. He wore his future alpha status like a crown, radiating dominance and entitlement. His gaze found her immediately, and his lip curled in disgust. "There you are," Kellen said. "You've caused quite a bit of trouble, Omega." "She's under my protection," Kaelin said, moving between Sarah and Kellen. Ice was forming on the walls around him, responding to his rage. "Touch her, and it's war." Kellen laughed. "You're threatening war over a rejected Omega? Really, Ironwood? I thought the Alpha King had better taste." "My taste is none of your concern," Kaelin said coldly. "But Sarah is Northern Territory's Pack now. She bears my claiming mark. By Pack law, she's mine." Something ugly flashed across Kellen's face when he saw the bite on Sarah's shoulder. "You marked her? Already?" "Is there a problem with that, Thornridge?" Kaelin asked dangerously. "Only that she's ours. Thorn Valley Omega, born and bred. You can't just claim her because you want her." "He didn't want me," Sarah found herself saying. "I accepted his protection because you rejected me and called me a traitor." Kellen's attention snapped to her, and she saw calculation in his eyes. "That was a misunderstanding. Come back to Thorn Valley, and we'll sort this out." "Liar," Sarah said flatly. "You called me a burden. Said I was unworthy of being an alpha's mate." "I was angry," Kellen said, but his voice lacked sincerity. "Rejection can be reversed, Sarah. Come home, and I'll restore the bond." The offer should have meant something. Hours ago, Sarah would have given anything to hear those words. But now, with Kaelin's protective presence at her back and Asher's frightened face peeking around his father's legs, she realized she didn't want Kellen anymore. Maybe she never really had. "No," Sarah said clearly. "I won't go back to a pack that treated me like garbage. I'm Northern Territories now." Kellen's expression darkened. "Then you're a traitor. And traitors don't get protection from pack law." He moved fast, crossing the room in a blur. But Kaelin was faster. He met Kellen head-on, and the two alphas collided with bone-shaking force. Ice met fire as their powers clashed. Kaelin's control over winter magic was legendary, but Kellen had fire in his veins, a rare gift that made him deadly in combat. The cottage became a war zone. Thorn Valley warriors tried to grab Sarah, but Finian and the other northern guards fought them back. Furniture shattered, walls cracked, and through it all, Sarah clutched Asher to her chest, using her body to shield him. "Stop!" she screamed. "Please, stop!" But no one listened. Blood stained the wooden floor, and she felt Kaelin's pain through their bond every time Kellen landed a blow. This was her fault. All of it. If she'd just left Asher in the forest, none of this would be happening. Except Asher would be dead, her conscience whispered. The little boy in her arms was crying, his small hands fisted in her shirt. Through their soul bond, Sarah felt his terror, his confusion. Something inside her snapped. Later, she wouldn't remember deciding to use her magic. She just knew she couldn't watch this anymore, couldn't let innocent wolves die because two alphas were fighting over her like she was a prize to be won. Power exploded from Sarah's body, not the golden healing light, but something else. Something ancient and furious and utterly beyond her control. White light filled the cottage, so bright it was blinding. Every wolf in the room was thrown backward by the force of it, including Kaelin and Kellen. When the light faded, Sarah stood in the center of the destruction with Asher still protected in her arms. Her eyes were glowing pure white, and her voice echoed with otherworldly power when she spoke. "Enough." The words seemed to shake the very foundations of the cottage. Every wolf present felt the weight of dominance rolling off her. Not alpha dominance, but something older. Something that made even Kellen drop to his knees instinctively. "She's not just an Omega," someone whispered. "She's a moonchild." Sarah didn't know what that meant. All she knew was that she was tired of being fought over, tired of being treated like she had no say in her own fate. "I choose the Northern Territories," she said, her glowing eyes fixed on Kellen. "I choose Kaelin. And if you or anyone else tries to take me by force, I will defend myself. Is that clear?" Kellen stared at her with shock, and something that might have been regret. "Sarah, I didn't know." "You didn't know because you never cared to look," Sarah interrupted. "You saw an Omega and decided I was worthless. Well, I'm done being treated like I'm nothing. Now get out." The power in her voice left no room for argument. Kellen climbed to his feet slowly, his expression complicated. "This isn't over," he said, but there was no real threat in his voice. He looked shaken. "Yes, it is," Kaelin said, moving to stand beside Sarah. Blood dripped from a cut above his eye, but he stood tall and proud. Sarah made her choice. Honor it or face the consequences. For a long moment the two alphas stared at each other. Then Kellen gestured to his warriors. "Fall back," he ordered. "We're leaving." As the Thorn Valley wolves retreated, Kellen paused in the doorway. He looked back at Sarah one last time. "I was a fool," he said quietly. "I see that now. But don't think this makes you safe, Sarah. There are forces at work that neither of us fully understands yet. Watch your back." Then he was gone, and the cottage fell silent except for Asher's sniffles. Sarah felt the power drain from her all at once. Her legs buckled, and Kaelin caught her before she could fall. "I've got you," he murmured, lowering them both to the floor. "Always." Asher curled against her chest, and Sarah wrapped her arms around him weakly. Through their bond, she felt his fear fading, replaced by trust and love. "You saved us," Asher whispered. "You're so strong, Sarah." But Sarah didn't feel strong. She felt terrified, because whatever power had just manifested through her, it was far beyond anything she'd ever imagined. "What's a moonchild?" she asked Kaelin tiredly. His expression was grave. "Someone blessed directly by the moon goddess herself, born once every few generations, if that." He brushed hair back from her face gently. "It means you're not just powerful, Sarah. You're sacred. And now that Kellen knows what you are..." "I'm in more danger than ever," Sarah finished. Kaylin's arms tightened around her protectively. Not if I have anything to say about it. By the time Finian returned with Sarah's grandmother, the sun was setting and the cottage had been hastily repaired by Kaylin's guards. Sarah's grandmother, Nessa Whitlock, was a tiny woman with silver hair and keen, intelligent eyes. Despite her age and frailty, she took one look at the devastation and the assembled Northern Territory's wolves and simply nodded. "Well," she said dryly, "I suppose this explains why 3 large warriors showed up at my door demanding I pack my things." "Grandmother!" Sarah rushed to embrace her, careful of the old woman's fragile bones. "Easy, child," Nessa said, but her thin arms wrapped around Sarah tightly. "Let me look at you." She pulled back, studying Sarah's face with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You used it, didn't you? The gift." "I didn't have a choice," Sarah said quietly. "There was a child dying." "I'm not scolding you, foolish girl." Nessa cupped Sarah's face gently. "I'm proud. Your mother would be proud too." Tears stung Sarah's eyes. "Kellen knows what I am now. What we are." "Then it's good you're leaving," Nessa said practically. She looked past Sarah to where Kaylin stood with Asher. "So you're the Alpha King who's caused such a fuss." Kaylin inclined his head respectfully. "Elder Whitlock, thank you for coming peacefully." "Did I have a choice?" Nessa asked, but there was humor in her tone. She studied Kaylin with those sharp eyes. "You marked my granddaughter." "A claiming of protection only," Kaylin said carefully. "She's under my guardianship." Nessa's gaze moved to the bite on Sarah's shoulder, then to the way Kaylin positioned himself protectively near her granddaughter. "If you say so." Before Kaylin could respond, Asher bounded forward. "Are you Sarah's grandmother?" he asked eagerly. "Do you have magic too?" Nessa smiled, her whole face transforming. "Hello, little prince. Yes, I have a bit of magic. Nothing like your Sarah, though. She's special." "I know," Asher agreed seriously. "She saved me. Twice." "Then I'm in your debt," Nessa said to Sarah. "This child is precious." "We need to leave," Finian interrupted. "Thorn Valley may have retreated, but they won't stay gone for long. And traveling after dark is dangerous." Kaylin nodded. "Agreed. Can you ride, Elder Whitlock?" "Not well," Nessa admitted. "My joints don't bend like they used to." "Then you'll ride with Marcus," Kaylin decided. "He has the steadiest seat." "Sarah, you'll ride with me. Asher can shift and run. It's good exercise for him." As the group prepared to depart, Sarah found herself lifted onto a massive black horse. Kaylin swung up behind her, his arms coming around to hold the reins. The position put her back against his chest, surrounded by his warmth and his scent, pine and winter air. "Comfortable?" he asked, his breath stirring her hair. "Yes," Sarah managed, trying to ignore how aware she was of every point where their bodies touched. Through their bond, she felt Kaylin's amusement. He knew exactly how he was affecting her. They rode through the night, moving swiftly but carefully through neutral territory. Asher, in wolf form, ran alongside Kaylin's horse, his silver-white fur gleaming in the moonlight. He seemed to have endless energy, occasionally darting off to investigate interesting scents before racing back. Sarah found herself relaxing against Kaylin despite her best intentions. The rhythmic movement of the horse, the warmth of his body, and the exhaustion from using so much magic all combined to make her drowsy. "Sleep," Kaylin murmured. "I'll keep you safe." "Can't sleep," Sarah protested, even as her eyes drifted closed. "Need to stay alert." "You saved my son twice, and unleashed enough power to knock back 20 warriors. I think you've earned a rest." His arms tightened around her slightly. "Sleep, Sarah. I've got you." The command in his voice made her Omega instincts want to obey, but it was the gentleness beneath the command that made her finally surrender to sleep. She dreamed of running through snow-covered forests with a great silver wolf beside her, of a castle made of ice and starlight, of a child's laughter echoing through ancient halls. When she woke, dawn was breaking, and they were approaching what could only be the Northern Territory's capital. The city rose from the valley like something from a fairy tale, white stone buildings with blue slate roofs, all dominated by a massive castle that seemed to be carved from a single piece of pale granite. Mountains surrounded the valley on 3 sides, their peaks still snow-capped despite the season. "Welcome to Frostholm," Kaelin said softly. "Your new home." Sarah stared in wonder. After the dark, cramped buildings of Thorn Valley, this place looked like another world entirely. As they rode through the city gates, wolves began emerging from buildings to watch their alpha kings return. Sarah felt their curious stares, heard the whispers starting. "Who's the Omega?" "She bears the king's mark." "Is that the lost prince?" Asher, back in human form and riding with Finian now, waved enthusiastically at everyone they passed. "I'm home!" he shouted. "And this is Sarah. She saved me." If Kaelin was embarrassed by his son's announcement, he didn't show it. He simply guided his horse steadily toward the castle, ignoring the growing crowd. But Sarah felt every stare, every moment of judgment. She was an outsider here, an Omega from another pack, with strange magic and no clear place in the hierarchy. Would they accept her? Or would this be Thorn Valley all over again? As if sensing her anxiety through their bond, Kaelin's hand found hers where it rested on the saddle. "You belong here," he said quietly, for her ears only. "Anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made something warm bloom in Sarah's chest. She squeezed his hand gratefully. They reached the castle courtyard, where servants rushed forward to take the horses. Kaelin dismounted first, then lifted Sarah down with careful strength. For a moment they stood close together, his hand still on her waist. "My lord," a cold female voice said. "How unexpected." Sarah turned to find a beautiful she-wolf watching them with calculating eyes. She was tall and elegant, with dark hair and the bearing of someone used to authority. Her gaze swept over Sarah dismissively before fixing on Kaelin. "Lady Morgana," Kaelin said, his tone noticeably cooler. "I didn't expect you to still be in residence." "Your mother invited me to stay while you were searching for Asher," Morgana said. Her gaze dropped to the little boy, and something ugly flickered in her expression before being quickly masked. "I'm so glad he's been found. Safe and sound." Sarah didn't trust this woman, and through their bond, she felt Kaelin's wariness too. "Asher is fine, no thanks to the wolves who kidnapped him," Kaelin said pointedly. "Sarah here saved his life." Morgana's gaze finally focused on Sarah properly, and her lip curled. "An Omega? How quaint. I'm sure she was adequately compensated for her service." "She's packed now," Kaelin said, his voice hard. "Under my personal protection. I expect her to be treated with the same respect as any other pack member." "Of course, my lord," Morgana said, but her eyes promised otherwise. Before the tension could escalate, an older woman emerged from the castle. She had Kaelin's winter blue eyes and silver-streaked black hair, and she moved with the grace of someone who'd been born to power. "Kaelin," she said, relief flooding her voice, "and my grandson." She swept Asher up into a fierce hug. "Oh, my sweet boy. I was so worried." "I'm okay, grandmother," Asher said, hugging her back. "Sarah made me all better." The woman, clearly the Queen Mother, turned to Sarah with interest. "Did she now?" "Mother, this is Sarah Whitlock," Kaelin said. "Sarah, my mother, Queen Alara Ironwood." Sarah quickly curtsied, unsure of proper protocol. Your Majesty. None of that, Ilara said warmly, studying Sarah with keen eyes. Any wolf who saved my grandson is family. Welcome to Frostholm, dear. Her gaze caught on the claiming bite on Sarah's shoulder, and something knowing entered her expression. Oh, I see. How interesting. It's a protection claim only? Kaelin said quickly. Of course it is, dear, Ilara agreed, but she was smiling. Well, come inside. You all must be exhausted. We'll have rooms prepared, hot baths drawn, and a proper feast to celebrate Asher's return. As they moved toward the castle entrance, Sarah felt overwhelmed. Just yesterday, she'd been a rejected Omega with nowhere to go. Now she was standing in the Alpha King's castle, marked by his protection, connected to his son through a soul bond, and apparently being welcomed by his mother. How had her life changed so dramatically in less than 24 hours? Breathe, Kaelin murmured beside her. You're safe here. Sarah wanted to believe him, but as she felt Morgana's hostile stare boring into her back and saw the suspicious looks from some of the castle wolves, she couldn't shake the feeling that her troubles were just beginning. Still, she had a warm bed waiting, food that wasn't scraps, and most importantly, she had Asher's small hand slipping trustingly into hers as they walked through the massive doors. She had her grandmother safely beside her, already chatting with Queen Ilara about herbs and healing. She had a new pack that might, possibly, accept her. For now, that was enough. The first week in Frostholm passed in a blur of new faces, customs, and responsibilities. Sarah was given a room in the royal wing. So you can be close to Asher, Queen Ilara explained. That was larger than her entire former cabin. Her grandmother was housed nearby, and Sarah visited her daily, grateful to have family close. But integration into the pack wasn't easy. Most Northern Territories wolves were welcoming, curious about the Omega who'd saved their prince, but others, particularly those loyal to Lady Morgana, made their disdain clear. Sarah was an outsider, they whispered. A rejected Omega with suspicious magic. What was she really doing here? The worst part was that Kaelin seemed to be avoiding her. Oh, he was polite when they met in passing. He asked about her well-being, ensured she had everything she needed. But the warmth from their journey was gone, replaced by formal distance that made Sarah's chest ache. Through their bond, she could feel his conflict. A war between his wolf's protective instincts and something else he kept carefully locked away. He's fighting the mate bond, Nessa said one afternoon as they took tea in the castle gardens. Your power called to his. That's why he marked you so quickly, why the bond formed so strongly. But we're not mates, Sarah protested. He rejected that possibility from the start. Did he? Nessa raised an eyebrow. Or did he simply not want to pressure you after what you'd been through? Sarah had no answer to that. Her days fell into a pattern. Mornings with Asher, teaching him to control his shifting and tending to his health. Afternoons learning about Northern Territories' customs from Queen Ilara. Evenings studying her magic with Elder Rowan, the pack's ancient magic keeper. You're a moonchild, Elder Rowan explained during one lesson. Blessed by the goddess herself. Your power isn't just healing, it's creation, protection, even destruction when necessary. The old wolf's eyes were serious. Such gifts haven't been seen in centuries, and with great power comes great danger. What kind of danger? Sarah asked. Those who would use your power for their own ends. Those who fear what you represent? And those who would destroy you to prevent you from reaching your full potential. It was during her second week that things came to a head. Sarah was walking with Asher through the castle gardens when they heard shouting. They followed the sound to find a crowd gathered in the training yard, watching Kaelin spar with another wolf. Not just any wolf. Morgana in her battle form. The two circled each other, both bleeding from various cuts. This wasn't a friendly match. This was vicious. Personal. Papa's angry, Asher whispered, pressing close to Sarah's side. Sarah could feel it through their bond. Kalen's rage, carefully controlled, but burning hot beneath his icy exterior. What happened? She asked a nearby guard. Lady Morgana challenged the Alpha King's decision to bring an outsider into the pack. The guard said uncomfortably. Specifically, she challenged his right to mark you as protected without pack approval. Sarah's blood ran cold. This fight is about me? Mama Sarah, don't worry, Asher said, using the name he'd started calling her recently. Papa always wins. But watching Morgana's calculated attacks, Sarah wasn't so sure. The she-wolf was skilled, ruthless, and clearly fighting with something to prove. Through their bond, Sarah felt Kalen's focus waver, just for a second, as he sensed her presence. That second was all Morgana needed. Her claws raked across Kalen's chest, drawing blood. The crowd gasped. Asher cried out. And something inside Sarah snapped. She didn't remember moving. One moment she was at the edge of the training yard. The next she was between Kalen and Morgana, her hands glowing with power. Enough, she said, her voice carrying unnatural authority. Morgana snarled. This doesn't concern you, Omega. It concerns me when someone attacks the Alpha King over my presence in the pack, Sarah shot back. If you have a problem with me, face me directly, not him. The crowd went silent. Even Kalen stared at her in shock. Morgana's lips curled into a cruel smile. Are you challenging me, little Omega? Do you even know how to fight? No, Sarah admitted, but I know how to protect what's mine. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Kalen's sharp intake of breath was audible even over the crowd's murmurs. Fine, Morgana said, shifting back to human form. Her eyes glittered with malice. I accept your challenge. Tomorrow at dawn, we fight. The winner's status in the pack is secured. The loser accepts subordination and the winner's judgment. Morgana, no, Kalen began, but Sarah cut him off. I accept, she said clearly. The crowd erupted. Morgana smiled triumphantly and stalked away. And Kalen grabbed Sarah's arm, dragging her toward the castle with barely controlled fury radiating through their bond. He pulled her into an empty council room, shut the door, and rounded on her. What were you thinking? He demanded. Morgana is a trained warrior. She'll kill you. She was killing you, Sarah shot back, and all because you marked me. I won't let you suffer for protecting me. That's not your decision to make? Yes, it is. Sarah's own temper flared. You claimed me, Kalen. You said I was yours to protect. Well, that blade cuts both ways. You're mine to protect too. Kalen stared at her, breathing hard. Through their bond, Sarah felt his emotions warring, anger, fear, frustration, and beneath it all, something fierce and possessive that made her wolf keen with recognition. You're going to get yourself killed, he said, his voice rough, and I can't lose you. The admission seemed torn from him. Sarah stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. Then help me, she said softly. Teach me to fight. I have one night to learn enough to survive. For a long moment, Kalen just looked at her. Then he cursed under his breath and pulled her against him, his forehead resting against hers. You're impossible, he muttered. Stubborn, reckless, impossible. Is that a yes? Sarah asked, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart racing beneath her palms. It's a yes, Kalen said, but we do this my way. No magic, no powers. If you face Morgana, you face her as a wolf. Understood? Sarah nodded. Understood. Good. Kalen stepped back, though his hands lingered on her waist for a moment longer than necessary. Then let's get started. We have until dawn. That night was the hardest of Sarah's life. Kaylin drilled her relentlessly in the basics of wolf combat. How to dodge, how to use her smaller size as an advantage, where to strike for maximum damage. Her Omega instincts fought against attacking an alpha, but Kaylin pushed through them ruthlessly. In a real fight, your instincts will get you killed, he said, not pulling his punches. You need to override them. You need to be willing to hurt me to survive. Sarah tried. She really did. But every time she managed to land a hit on Kaylin, she felt his pain through their bond and hesitated. Again, Kaylin barked. Don't hesitate. Morgana won't. They trained until Sarah could barely stand. Her body was covered in bruises, her muscles screaming in protest. But she was faster, more aware of her movements. Finally, as the first hints of dawn colored the sky, Kaylin called a halt. That's all we have time for, he said, breathing hard himself. Listen to me, Sarah. When you shift, stay low. Use your speed. You're smaller and faster than Morgana. Don't try to overpower her. Just survive long enough to find an opening. And then? Sarah asked. Then you go for the throat. Kaylin's eyes were hard. In wolf combat, it's kill or be killed. There's no middle ground. Sarah swallowed hard. Could she really kill someone? Even someone trying to kill her? As if reading her thoughts, Kaylin cupped her face gently. I'll be there, he promised. If it goes too far, I'll stop it. But you need to give me time to get there. Can you do that? I can try, Sarah said. That's all I ask. Kaylin's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. For what it's worth. I believe in you. The words warmed something deep inside her. Sarah leaned into his touch, wishing they had more time, wishing so many things were different. But dawn was coming, and with it, the fight that would determine her future. The entire pack gathered in the training yard as the sun rose. Sarah stood on one side, with Kaylin, Finian, and Asher nearby. Across from her, Morgana stretched languidly, confidence radiating from every pore. Queen Alara stepped forward to officiate. Her expression was troubled, but she followed protocol. This is a challenge fight, she announced. First blood, submission, or death. Does either party wish to withdraw? No, Morgana said immediately. All eyes turned to Sarah. She felt the weight of their stares, the expectation that she would back down, that she would show her Omega cowardice and flee. Through her bond with Kaylin, she felt his steady confidence. Through her bond with Asher, she felt the boy's absolute faith in her. No, Sarah said clearly, I don't withdraw. Then let the challenge begin. Ilara stepped back. Shift and fight. Sarah had only shifted a handful of times since discovering her wolf form. Each time had been awkward, painful, her body not quite sure how to make the transition. But this time, with Kaylin's mark burning on her shoulder and power thrumming through her veins, the shift came easily. Her bones reformed, fur sprouted across her skin, and within seconds she stood on 4 legs. Her wolf form was smaller than most, an Omega trait, but her fur was unusual. Silver-white like Asher's, but shot through with threads of gold that seemed to glow in the morning light. Morgana shifted opposite her, and Sarah felt a jolt of fear. The she-wolf was massive, easily twice Sarah's size, with midnight black fur and fangs that gleamed like daggers. Last chance to run, little Omega. Morgana's words came through their wolf speech, understandable to all present. Sarah didn't respond. She just dropped into the stance Kaylin had taught her. Low, balanced, ready. Morgana attacked. The she-wolf moved like lightning, crossing the distance between them in a heartbeat. Sarah barely dodged, feeling claws whistle past her ear. Too slow, Morgana taunted, spinning for another attack. Sarah rolled away, using her smaller size to slip under Morgana's guard. She managed to rake her claws across the larger wolf's flank, barely a scratch, but first blood. The crowd roared. Morgana snarled in fury, her attacks becoming more vicious, less controlled. Sarah danced away from each strike, remembering Kaylin's lessons. Stay light. Stay fast. Survive. But she was tiring quickly, and Morgana knew it. The larger wolf herded Sarah toward the edge of the yard, cutting off escape routes. "You're weak," Morgana sneered. "Just like all Omegas, you don't belong here. You don't belong with him." The words struck deeper than claws. Sarah stumbled, and Morgana seized the opening. Massive jaws closed around Sarah's shoulder. Not the marked one, but close enough. Pain exploded through Sarah. She felt Kaylin's answering roar of rage through their bond, felt him moving toward them. But she also felt something else. Asher's fear, his desperation, his absolute certainty that she couldn't lose. "Mama Sarah can do anything," his young voice whispered through their soul bond. "She's magic." And suddenly, Sarah remembered. She wasn't just an Omega. She was a moon child. Blessed by the goddess herself. Power surged through her, not the golden healing light but something wilder. Her eyes began to glow, and the air around her shimmered with energy. Morgana released her shoulder, stumbling back in shock. "What?" Sarah didn't give her time to finish. She lunged faster than she'd ever moved before, and her teeth found Morgana's throat. Not to kill, to dominate. Sarah held the larger wolf there, feeling Morgana's pulse racing beneath her jaws. She could end this. One bite, and it would be over. But she heard Kaylin's voice in her memory. "You're not a killer, Sarah. Don't let her make you into one." Sarah released Morgana and stepped back, shifting to human form despite her nakedness. "Submit," she said, her voice carrying power, "or I will finish this." Morgana shifted back as well, blood streaming from the wound on her neck. Her eyes were wide with shock and something that might have been fear. Morgana swallowed hard. "I submit." The crowd erupted in cheers. Sarah swayed, exhaustion and pain crashing over her now that the adrenaline was fading. Strong arms caught her, Kaylin, wrapping her in his cloak, holding her close. "You did it," he murmured against her hair. "You magnificent, terrifying woman. You did it." Sarah clung to him, feeling safe for the first time since the challenge had been issued. But as she looked over his shoulder, she saw Morgana watching them with an expression that was carefully neutral, accepting her subordination as the challenge terms demanded. Sarah had won. She'd secured her place in the pack. But something told her this was just the beginning of a much larger story. 3 days after the challenge, Sarah woke to find Asher missing. She'd felt uneasy through their soul bond all morning, a low-level anxiety that gradually built into panic. When she rushed to his room and found it empty, his bed cold, she knew something was terribly wrong. "Kaylin!" she called out through their bond, not caring if using their connection so openly was improper. He arrived within seconds, still in his sleeping clothes. "What's wrong?" "Asher's gone." Sarah couldn't keep the tremor from her voice. "I can feel him through our bond. He's frightened. In pain." Kaylin's expression hardened instantly. He closed his eyes, clearly reaching for his own parental bond with his son. His face went pale. "Shadow magic," he growled. "It's blocking most of my connection, but I can feel him." South, toward the Thorn Valley border. "Kellen," Sarah breathed. "He took him. This is revenge for me rejecting him." "We don't know that yet," Finian said, arriving with a contingent of guards. "But we're mobilizing the pack now." "There's no time." Sarah felt Asher's fear spike through their bond. "He's dying. The shadow magic is poisoning him again." Without conscious thought, Sarah reached deeper into their soul bond than she'd ever dared before. And through it, She could see through Asher's eyes, darkness, the smell of damp stone, and a figure in black robes chanting words she didn't understand. "He's in the old ruins," she said, "where the borders meet. I can see it through Asher." Kaelin stared at her. That shouldn't be possible." "Moonchild." Elder Rowan's voice came from the doorway. The ancient wolf looked grim. "Her power is manifesting fully. But Your Majesty, if she's seeing through the soul bond, that means—" "The poison is killing him," Kaelin finished. "When one half of a soul bond dies, the other follows shortly after." Ice flooded Sarah's veins. "How long?" "Hours," Elder Rowan said quietly. "Maybe less." "Then we ride now," Kaelin commanded. "Finian, gather our fastest wolves. Leave a contingent to guard the castle. This could be a diversion." Within minutes, they were racing south through the forest. Sarah rode with Kaelin again, but this time there was no comfort in his nearness. She could only feel Asher's pain growing stronger, his young voice calling for her through their bond. "Mama Sarah, it hurts. Please make it stop." "I'm coming, little one," she sent back. "Hold on, please hold on." They reached the ruins just as the sun began to set. The ancient stones jutted from the earth like broken teeth, casting long shadows across the ground. And standing in the center of the ruins, surrounded by robed figures, was Kellen. He held Asher, unconscious and covered in the same black veins as before, in his arms, like a trophy. "Ironwood," Kellen called out. "How good of you to join us." "Let my son go," Kaelin said, his voice deadly calm. "Now." "Oh, I don't think so," Kellen smiled cruelly. "You see, I've learned some interesting things about your precious prince. About what his blood can be used for when combined with the right magic." "You're insane," Finian snarled. "Harming a child?" "Harming a weapon," Kellen corrected. "Did you know that Moonchild blood and Royal Wolf blood, combined through blood magic, can create a power source strong enough to rival the goddess herself?" He looked directly at Sarah. "And you were foolish enough to bond your soul to him. All I had to do was wait for the connection to grow strong enough, then take him. Now I have access to both your powers." Sarah felt sick. "You planned this from the beginning." "Of course," Kellen said. "Why do you think I rejected you so publicly? I needed you desperate, vulnerable. Needed you to save the prince and bond with him without realizing what you were doing. The shadow curse was specifically designed to require multiple healings, to strengthen your connection each time." "You monster," Sarah breathed. "I'm practical," Kellen corrected. "With the power I'll harvest from both of you, I can overthrow the old pack structures entirely. No more weakness, no more omegas dragging us down. Only the strong will survive." The robed figures began chanting, and Sarah felt the magic in the air shift. Shadow magic? Yes, but also something older, darker. Blood magic that shouldn't exist. Kaelin moved to attack, but the robed figures created a barrier, walls of solid shadow that even his ice magic couldn't penetrate. "You can't reach him," Kellen taunted, "but please, try. I enjoy watching you fail." Through her bond with Asher, Sarah felt the boy's life fading. The blood magic was draining him, using his royal power as fuel for whatever ritual Kellen was conducting. "Mama Sarah," Asher's weak voice whispered, "I'm scared." Something inside Sarah broke. This child, this innocent, loving child who'd accepted her without question, who'd called her Mama and trusted her absolutely, was dying because of her. "No," she said aloud, "I won't let this happen." "You can't stop it," Kellen said. "The bond links you to him. When the ritual completes, it'll drain both your powers simultaneously. You'll both die, and I'll absorb everything you were." "Sarah, don't—" Kaylin began, but she was already moving. She didn't run toward the barrier. Instead, she closed her eyes and reached deep into the soul bond with Asher. Not just to see through his eyes or feel his emotions, but to merge with him completely. The world shifted, and suddenly Sarah wasn't in her body anymore. She was inside Asher's consciousness, two souls sharing one space. "I'm here," she told him. "You're not alone." "Mama." Asher's relief was palpable. "You came." "Always," Sarah promised. "Now, let's show this bad man what moon children can really do." She'd never tried to use her power from inside someone else's consciousness. Didn't know if it was even possible. But Asher's royal blood sang with magic, and her moonchild power recognized it as compatible. Together, they reached for the shadow magic trying to drain them. And instead of fighting it, Sarah did something unexpected. She absorbed it. The dark magic flooded into her, trying to corrupt and destroy. But Sarah's white light met it head-on, not pushing it away, but transforming it, purifying it, reclaiming it. Outside, in the physical world, the robed figure's chanting faltered. Kellen's expression shifted from confidence to confusion. "What's happening?" he demanded. "She's inside the prince," one of the robed figures gasped. "She's using the soul bond to merge their powers." "That's impossible," Kellen snarled. But it wasn't impossible. It was happening. Sarah felt Asher's consciousness strengthen, his royal wolf power combining with her moonchild magic in ways that defied explanation. White light began to glow from Asher's small body, growing brighter and brighter until it was blinding. The shadow barrier shattered. Kellen stumbled backward, shielding his eyes. "No! Stop her!" But the robed figures were fleeing, terrified of the power now radiating from the child in Kellen's arms. Kalen didn't waste the opportunity. He shifted mid-leap, his massive silver wolf form crashing into Kellen with bone-breaking force. Asher tumbled from Kellen's grip, and Finian caught the boy before he could hit the ground. Sarah pulled back from Asher's consciousness, returning to her own body. She swayed, momentarily disoriented, but forced herself to focus. Kellen was on his feet again, shifting into his own wolf form, massive and black, with flames licking around his paws. He and Kalen circled each other, two alphas ready to fight to the death. "Enough." Sarah's voice cracked like a whip, carrying power that made both wolves freeze. She walked forward, her hands beginning to glow with that white light. But it wasn't healing light this time. It was something else entirely. Judgment. Absolute and final. "You hurt a child," Sarah said, her eyes glowing pure white. "You cursed him, poisoned him, and tried to use him as a power source. For that, the goddess demands justice." "The goddess has no power here," Kellen snarled. "This is the real world, where strength matters more than divine favor." "Then let me show you what divine favor looks like," Sarah said. The power that exploded from her was unlike anything she'd manifested before. It wasn't just magic. It was the moon goddess's own wrath, channeled through her chosen vessel. White light engulfed Kellen, and he screamed as it burned away the shadow magic corrupting him. Sarah could see it now, could see that Kellen himself had been touched by shadow magic, corrupted slowly over months until the ambitious future alpha had become something twisted and dark. She burned it all away, purifying him whether he wanted it or not. When the light faded, Kellen collapsed in human form, gasping and disoriented. The corruption was gone, but so was much of his power. He looked up at Sarah with wide, frightened eyes. "What? What did you do to me?" "I saved you," Sarah said simply. "From yourself." She turned to Kalen, who was shifting back to human form. "He's been corrupted for months. Probably since before Asher was taken. Someone's been using him as a puppet." "Who?" Kalen demanded. Before anyone could answer, slow applause echoed through the ruins. A figure emerged from the shadows, Morgana, her smile cruel and satisfied. "Well done, Moonchild," she said. "You've just done exactly what I needed you to do. You've proven your power works even better than anticipated." Sarah's blood ran cold. "This was all you." "Obviously." Morgana gestured dismissively. "Kellen was easy to corrupt. So much ambition, so little sense. The shadow magic, the kidnapping, even his rejection of you. All carefully orchestrated to push you into manifesting your full power." Her eyes gleamed. "And now that I know what you're capable of, I can take it for myself." "You're insane," Finian said, moving protectively in front of Asher. "I'm ambitious," Morgana corrected. "There's a difference. And with a Moonchild's power, I could rule not just one pack, but all the territories. No more bowing to Alpha Kings. No more accepting subordination from males who think they're superior simply because of their gender." "You'll have to go through me first," Kaelin growled. "Oh, I'm counting on it," Morgana said. She began to chant, and Sarah felt shadow magic gathering, not the sloppy, corrupted magic that had touched Kellen, but something ancient and refined. Morgana wasn't just a power-hungry she-wolf. She was a shadow witch, trained in dark arts that had been forbidden for centuries. "Sarah, take Asher and run," Kaelin commanded. "Get him to safety." But Sarah shook her head. "No, I'm not running anymore." She reached for Asher through their bond, and the boy, still weak but recovering, immediately understood. He stood and took her hand, his small fingers wrapping around hers trustingly. "Together?" he asked. "Together," Sarah confirmed. As one, they called on their shared power. White light erupted from both of them, not two separate streams but one unified force that was greater than the sum of its parts. The light met Morgana's shadow magic head-on, and the resulting explosion of power knocked everyone to the ground. When the dust cleared, Morgana was on her knees, blood streaming from her nose and eyes. "Impossible," she gasped. "You can't. Two souls shouldn't be able to merge like that." "We're not just any souls," Sarah said, helping Asher to his feet. "We're pack. We're family. And that's a bond even your dark magic can't break." Morgana tried to rise, to attack again, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The shadow magic had consumed too much of her life force, leaving her drained and powerless. Kaelin's guards moved forward to restrain her. As they led her away, Morgana's eyes fixed on Sarah one last time. "This isn't over," she hissed. "There are others like me. Others who know what you are. They'll come for you." "Let them," Sarah said quietly. "I'll be ready." As the guards took Morgana and Kellen away, Sarah finally allowed herself to collapse. Kaelin caught her immediately, cradling her against his chest. "You were incredible," he murmured. "Terrifying and incredible." "I was desperate," Sarah admitted. "When I felt Asher dying." "You saved him." Again. Kaelin's arms tightened around her. "How many times are you going to do that before you accept that you're a hero?" "I'm not a hero," Sarah protested weakly. "I'm just someone who couldn't let a child die." "That's what makes you a hero," Kaelin said. He pressed his lips to her forehead, and through their bond, Sarah felt something shift. The careful walls he'd been maintaining crumbled, and his true feelings flooded through. Love. Fierce, protective, overwhelming love. "Kaelin." Sarah looked up at him, her heart racing. "I know," he said quietly. "It's too soon. You've been through too much. But Sarah, I can't keep pretending I only marked you for protection. My wolf recognized you from the first moment. You're your mate," Sarah finished. "I know. I've known for weeks." They stared at each other, and in the ruins of a battlefield, surrounded by the aftermath of dark magic, Sarah finally allowed herself to hope. 1 month later, the Northern Territories celebrated the summer solstice with a massive festival. The castle grounds were decorated with lights and flowers, and wolves from allied packs traveled from across the realm to attend. But the real reason for celebration wasn't the solstice. It was the formal mating ceremony between Alpha King Kaelin Ironwood and his chosen mate, Sarah. Sarah stood in her chambers, staring at her reflection. The dress Queen Alara had commissioned was beautiful, silver silk that shimmered like moonlight, embroidered with patterns that represented both the Northern Territories and the Moon Goddess. "You look beautiful, dear," Nessa said, adjusting Sarah's hair one final time. "I look terrified," Sarah admitted. "That too," her grandmother agreed with a smile. "But that's normal. You're about to pledge yourself to the most powerful alpha in the realm. Terror is appropriate." "It's not the ceremony I'm worried about," Sarah said quietly. "It's what comes after. Being a queen. Leading a pack. What if I fail?" "You won't," Nessa said firmly. "You saved the prince twice, defeated a shadow witch, and integrated into a new pack in less than 2 months. If you can do all that, you can certainly handle being queen." A knock at the door interrupted them. Asher burst in, wearing formal robes that made him look impossibly grown up for a 4-year-old. "Mama Sarah," he said excitedly. "Papa says it's almost time. Are you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Sarah said, kneeling to straighten his collar. Asher threw his arms around her neck. "I'm so happy you're going to be my real mama now," he whispered. Tears stung Sarah's eyes. "Me too, sweetheart." The ceremony was held in the castle's grand hall, witnessed by hundreds of pack members and visiting dignitaries. Sarah walked down the aisle on unsteady legs, her hand tucked into Nessa's arm. At the altar stood Kaelin, resplendent in formal ceremonial robes. But it was his eyes that captured Sarah's attention, winter blue and blazing with love and pride. Elder Rowan performed the ceremony, speaking the ancient words that would bind them as mates before the moon goddess and the pack. "Do you, Kaelin Ironwood, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, take this woman as your mate? To protect, to cherish, to stand beside through all challenges?" "I do," Kaelin said, his voice ringing clear. "And do you, Sarah Whitlock, Moonchild and Healer, take this man as your mate? To support, to challenge, to stand beside as his equal?" "I do," Sarah said, her voice only trembling slightly. "Then by the power vested in me by the moon goddess herself, I declare you mates. May your bond be strong, your love eternal, and your pack prosperous." Kaelin stepped forward, cupping Sarah's face gently. "Ready?" he murmured. Sarah nodded, tilting her head to expose her neck, the true mating spot. Kaelin's teeth sank into the sensitive junction where her neck met her shoulder, and Sarah gasped as their bond exploded into something infinitely stronger. She felt Kaelin's soul touching hers, merging with hers, two becoming one in the most fundamental way possible. When he pulled back, his eyes were glowing. Sarah reached up, pulling him down so she could return the mark. Her teeth found his neck, and she felt his sharp intake of breath, felt his hands tightening on her waist. When they finally separated, both bearing fresh mating marks, the hall erupted in cheers. "I present to you," Elder Rowan announced, "Alpha King Kaelin and Queen Sarah Ironwood." The celebration lasted well into the night. Sarah danced with Kaelin, with Asher, with Finian, and even with her grandmother. Wolves from across the territories came to offer their congratulations and pledge their loyalty to their new queen. As the moon rose high overhead, Kaelin pulled Sarah aside to a quiet balcony overlooking the city. "Happy?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "More than I ever thought possible," Sarah admitted, leaning back against his chest. Through their completed bond, she could feel his contentment, his love, his absolute certainty that she was his perfect match. "I have something to tell you," Sarah said nervously. Kalen turned her to face him, his expression concerned. "What is it?" Sarah took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "Elder Rowan confirmed it this morning. We're going to have a baby." Kalen's eyes widened, then blazed with joy. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around as he laughed with pure happiness. "A baby," he breathed. "We're having a baby." From inside the hall, Sarah heard Asher's excited shout. Clearly, he'd been eavesdropping through their bond. "I'm going to be a big brother." Sarah laughed, her heart full to bursting. A year ago, she'd been a rejected Omega with nowhere to go. Now she had a mate who loved her, a son who adored her, a pack that accepted her, and a baby on the way. She had found her purpose as a healer, her strength as a moon child, and most importantly, her place as part of a family that valued her not despite her Omega status, but for who she truly was. "I'm home," she whispered against Kalen's chest. "You are," he agreed, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "And you always will be." Above them, the full moon shone down, blessing her chosen child with love, family, and the promise of a bright future. The moon goddess had guided Sarah through darkness to find her light, and now that light would shine for generations to come. Thank you so much for listening to the Omega's Mercy. I hope you enjoyed Sarah and Kalen's journey from desperate strangers to destined mates, and that Asher's brave little heart captured yours as much as it captured mine. A heartfelt thank you to everyone who's following along. Your support truly means the world to me, and I can't wait to share more magical love stories with you soon.